Hey darts fans, that's Timo Newman here, the transporter. Welcome to the good ship Undarted Waters, and we're ready for a new voyage. As you'll have seen from the title of the video, the voyage is, what about the left-handers? Is darts leaving left-handers behind? Is it biased towards left-handers? We're going to investigate this, and we're going to see what the evidence shows us and what the causes might be if it's true. So, going to get my whiteboard, going to get my jacket on, turn this light off, and we'll get cracking. Very excited about this series, and you can see I've just done a Shanghai on the 15s here because maybe for left-handed players the right-hand side of the board is a bit more friendly, but 15, that's not a very popular number to go out on with doubles, is it? Right, let's get that old whiteboard up. I hope everyone can see that clearly there. So, is darts biased against left-handers? I'm planning 4 videos in this series. The first one today, I'm going to look at some evidence. So, as far as I'm concerned right now, having looked at the evidence, the answer is a huge yes. But I wanted to leave it as a question in the title in case I haven't thought of something. So maybe I'm missing something. But as far as I'm concerned right now, the evidence says a screaming yes, it's biased against left-handers. If it is biased against left-handers, is that because tomorrow's video or the next video, human factors, is there something about the human that basically for left-handers darts is just a harder game? Is it intrinsic to a human being? Or the one after that, we're going to look at the environment of darts and we're going to look at the equipment that darts is played with. Are there elements of that which intrinsically make darts a right-handed game? And then finally, if we do all agree and conclude, well, we're not all going to agree, but I'm sure all the left-handers will agree. I'm a left-hander. We'll all agree that yes, darts is definitely biased. But if it is biased, what are the remedies? Do we care that a sport, a very popular sport, is actually prejudiced against 10% of the population? Maybe we don't. I don't know. Anyway, that's the plan. Okay? So, today's video, I'm very excited about this series. I've been reading a lot about left-handedness, and as a left-handed person, I've learned a lot. And I hope I can entertain you and also bring you information that you'll find interesting in this set of videos. I know I've got a couple of, at least 2 subscribers who are left-handers who have been keen to have this series. So, a shout out to you guys, and I hope the right-handers too, who will be roughly 90% of the viewers, by the way. I hope they find this interesting. So let's get rid of all this and let's start with the evidence. And the evidence is going to be very interesting, and I think unless you're a statistician and can prove that somehow I'm missing something, I think the evidence is going to be pretty darn compelling here, okay? So what evidence am I going to look at, and what's really the question? Darts, what do you mean by darts? Well, I'm talking about the elite level of the sport, like the Wimbledon of tennis or the World Boxing Heavyweight title, you know, the elite of the sport. By the way, Alexander Usyk, what an incredible talent, and he's a southpaw. So obviously in boxing they don't have this issue, right? But we'll get onto that in tomorrow's video. The human factors are fascinating in this. But let's today look at the evidence in darts. Let me start by telling you a fact. 1 in 10, roughly, of the population is left-handed. Okay? So that's our basic fact there. 1 in 10 is a lefty. And if we're going to be a bit more precise about this, it actually varies by gender too. And because we're only going to be looking at evidence for the open game, which is going to be pretty much all men, let's look at the male percentage. It's actually slightly bigger. It's 10.5% in men is left-handed. In women, it's more like 9%, just around 9, okay? Now, these numbers, I've been getting a lot of this information from Wikipedia, but I have been following up with the sources. I've been reading some scholarly articles about this. So, Obviously, I'm not an expert on handedness. I'm a physicist. This is not a specialization of mine, but I've tried to do a reasonable job getting these numbers and making sure they're robust, okay? But that's a ballpark figure, though, for us, that 1 in 10 people, a general, are left-handers. And let's assume that people who are interested in darts and who play darts for fun and maybe get good at it and become, you know, keen amateurs or professionals, let's just assume that there's still that roughly that 1 in 10, okay? Now, I want to look at the elite level of the sport, but before I do that, let me just tell you something about left-handers, right? That it's a right-handed world. Any left-handed person will tell you this. It's a right-handed world. When you go to use the bank machine and you have to kind of reach across to get your card in because it's on the right-hand side. If you try and use a pair of scissors and it won't cut, okay? Many examples. If you try and write going this direction and you smear all your ink, it's a right-handed world. And left-handers are used to this, right? We're used to fighting against that. We like being the underdog in that sense. But in our language, there's kind of a bit of prejudice here, okay? So, I've been looking up this. So, in the Latin, you have a word like, the word dextrous that we have, or dexterity, comes from the Latin, meaning skillful, okay? And then the opposite word is sinister. That's the Latin for sort of left-handed, but it also means harmful. So that's not very nice, right? So right-handed, skillful, left-handed, harmful, okay, or evil even, right? And don't be a left-handed witch in certain parts of the world at certain times, right? No chance. Now, our word left apparently comes from Old English, lift, and that actually meant idle or useless, okay? So that's not really, people like me, it's not giving us a lot of confidence, okay? And in the French, the word for left is gauche, and we have that word in English, and that means sort of clumsy and naive. So anything to do with left in our language and in our culture typically is bad, as opposed to right. You can be right-minded and so on and so forth. Even in the gospel, which by the way I know very well, but in the gospel in Matthew, Jesus talks about having the sheep, the saints, on his right hand and the goats, the sinners, on his left hand, okay? Got those wrong way around. So saints right, sinners left. So historically in all cultures left something very dubious because it's a minority, right? And it's hard to understand. Why is that annoying 10% left-handed? And in war, that would be very problematic because 1 in 10 opponents would do something very strange and pick up their weapon in the wrong hand, and all of a sudden you might be at a disadvantage. So, our language, our culture is quite biased, but we hope that our sports are not biased, right? Because we want sports to be a level playing field for all players. So let's look at the wonderful sport of darts, which we love. It's a fantastic sport. Let's look at the World Championship. And I'm going to start with the PDC. And this would be from 1994 to 2025, okay? So I've looked at all of the World Championships data for that period, and I'm not interested in like how many winners or how many runners up. What I'm interested in is how many different people were winners and how many different people were runners up, okay? And it turns out there were 13 different winners, so not 13 winners in total of course, but 13 different people who won, and there were 7 additional people who never won, but who were runners-up, okay? Obviously, a certain Mr. Taylor has something to do with the fact that there aren't many different winners, okay? So that's 20 in total. So 20 different people during the time of the PDC have been in the finals of the World Championship. How many left-handed? Can anyone guess? So the number of left-handers a big fat zero. Amazing. None. None. 0 left-handers have ever been in a World Championship final since 1994. Okay? So that's already an interesting piece of information. Okay? Now, I'm not a statistician, I'm a scientist, and so in physics we use probability theory in a very kind of like a workman-like way. We want to just kind of use it to get answers, but we don't do what I would call like sophisticated statistics. That's for a statistician to do. So if there is a statistician watching this, they can probably do, well, they will be able to do a much better job of this than I can. So they will shudder at the crude statistics that I'm going to do now, but it does give you ballpark answers. So what I'm going to do is not high-level statistics, but I would say it's robust and it's good enough to get a basic idea. So what we can say is, if you select a group at random of 20 people and say what's the chance that there are no left-handers, okay, what you do is you basically say, well, the chance of picking a right-hander for the first one is 0.9, because that's 90% of people are right-handed, so 0.9. And then the chance of doing that again is 0.9, and you keep doing that 20 times. And that will give you, so you do that 20 times, you multiply 90% by 90% by 90% by 90%, and that will give you the probability of selecting, the chance of selecting 20 people at random, and there's no left-handers. And that comes out to be, looking at my chart here, about 12%. So the chance, so if you had like parallel universes where you just ran the PDC World Championships, okay, in 12% of those universes there'd be no left-handers, and in the other 88% universes there would be left-handers who appear in the final. So if there is no bias, and if it is just all by chance, then we're in that universe which is in the 12%, which is like it's like a 1 in 9. Was that right? 1 in 8? 8 12s are 96. So roughly 1 in 8 universes don't have left-handers in the finals. 7 in 8 do. We're in that 1 in 8. So it seems unlikely, right? It seems like, okay, maybe there's some bias here. Well, let's just keep investigating and see if we can find some counterexamples, right? So that's the World Championship with the PDC, but let's go further back in time and look at the BDO. And there'll be lots of darts fans watching this who will know so much more than I do about the history of this huge split that happened between the BDO, the top players who eventually formed what later became known as the PDC. But if we look at the World Championship while it was still elite and unified, which was from 1978 up till 1993, so for most of that time it was BDO, and then it was kind of like a unified one, and then the PDC one split off in 1994, okay? But we've got all of this period of elite darts as well. We had 6 winners who are in addition to the 20 people we've seen in the PDC final. So there's 6 other people, okay, who won that. For example, Jockey Wilson and Eric Bristow and so on. And there were 4 additional runners-up. So I'm just trying to say what additional human beings took part in these World Championship finals besides the PDC ones. It's 10 more people. How many of these guys were left-handed? None. No left-handers. So now, statistically, this is looking like, if you just don't care about PDC and BDO, you just say World Championship darts of the elite level. So you track the BDO, the the joint one for a couple of years, and then the PDC. So always where the best players were playing from 1978 till 2025. There are 30 different human beings that have appeared in those finals, and none of them were left-handed. So we can now say, well, what's the chance of that then? So if you've got 0.9, you've now got to take 30 people at random and ask what's the chance that none of them are left-handed if there's no bias. So we do this now 30 times, and this turns out to be quite a lot smaller. This is roughly 4% now. So that's like saying, okay, you've got all these parallel universes, and 1 in 25, so 4% of them, so 1 in 25 of those parallel universes have no left-handed dart players, and no left-handed players in all the World Championships from 1978 till now. And in the other 24 out of 25 parallel universes, they all have left-handed players sometimes appearing. Okay, that seems, and we're in that 4%, we're in that 1 in 25. Seems highly unlikely, right? So the reasonable sort of conclusion from this is there must be an intrinsic bias against left-handed people if a left-handed person has never appeared in a final of a World Championship at the elite level. Now I'm going to come to what happened to BDO after the split in a minute, so I don't want to ignore the brilliant players who won it subsequently, but I'm just looking at that, you know, while it was BDO elite and then joint and then PDC is the period I'm looking at. Right, so more evidence. Let's just keep racking up the evidence here. Well, you could argue that's just years ago, and anyway, those parallel universes, you know, they've all disappeared by now. I just care about the here and now in this universe. So let's look at the current rankings. So we look at the PDC rankings, top 32, okay? How many left-handed players are there in the PDC of July 2025 in the top 32? We all know one, right? James Wade. He is the only one. There's one left-hander. And that is Mr. Wade at number 5, okay? And we're going to have more to say about James Wade in this series, because if we really do agree that this is a biased sport, we have to reevaluate James Wade's career very, very, seriously, actually. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so maybe this guy is one of the greatest dart players of all time, multiple world champion in those other 24 out of 25 universes. Okay, James Wade at number 5. Okay, Mr. Wade. None others though. Now, a statistician will start to get annoyed with me if I make the following statement, okay? But you can make statements like, kind of on average, if 1 in 10 players are left-handed, we would expect, if you looked at the world top 32, if it wasn't biased, you would kind of expect around 3 left-handed players. That sounds reasonable. Statisticians hate that kind of thing, quite rightly, because statistically it's pretty meaningless because we're dealing with such small numbers, okay? But we don't find 3 left-handed players in the world top 32. We find 1, all right? And if you ask for the probability naively of taking 32 people at random and you just finding less than 2 left-handers, either 0 or 1, so the probability of having 32 people and there being less than 2 left-handers, you can work that out. I won't take you through the calculation, it's not very difficult, but you find that's roughly about 15%. Okay, so it's kind of a 1 in 6 chance of there only being 1 left-hander in a group of 32. Okay, so what we've been finding are these very low probabilities of what our history is in darts. it was like a, what was it, like a 12% chance that there'd be no PDC left-handers even in the finals, winner or runner-up. It ended up being like a 4% chance that there's never been a left-handed player in the World Championship finals from BDO, joint and PDC. We're finding sort of a 1 in 15% chance of what we see in the current top 32 rankings. And that's because of one human being, James Wade. Like if James Wade had retired a few years ago, there would be no left-handed players in the top 32, and this percentage would be down in the like 2 or 3%, right? So one individual, one genius darts player is keeping this story even plausible that maybe, somehow, maybe it's not biased. But the evidence is very strongly suggesting that it is a significantly biased sport, okay, against left-handed players. And like I say, in the next video, I'm going to look at, is this something intrinsic to human beings? So the sport itself is not biased, it's just the way that left-handers' brains are wired, that they are just intrinsically less able at darts. Or is it something to do with the environment and the equipment and the setup in which darts is played that actually biases against left-handed players? Okay, I'll tell you now, I think it's the latter, but I want to keep it open. I want to try and do this scientifically. Of course, it's a topic that many people will have opinions on. Please let me know in the comments below what you think. But before I end this video, I want to say one more thing, which I think really gives us some insight into this. Okay, and it goes back to the BDO World Championship after the split. So let's have a quick look at that, okay? So let's talk about elite. Let's talk about what's a nice name for this? Like elite minus darts. So if you define elite darts as the best of the best of the best, world champions, top 32, we can talk about elite minus darts, like getting an A- on a piece of work. It's just one notch down from that, okay? And we can look then at, say, the BDO World Championships that happened, what's the dates of those? That's from 1994 up to, I think, about 2020. And there were 18 different human beings who were winners. So 18 different winners. 2 of them were left-handed. Now we're actually seeing some more left-handers here. There were 2 left-handed players. There's Mark Webster and there was Les Wallace. And that's interesting again. I mean, apologies to the statisticians, but if you take 20 people at random and say, what's the chance of having, how many left-handers would we expect? If 1 in 10 people on average is left-handed, if you pick 20 people, kind of on average you expect there to be 2. And so we've got roughly 20 different people here who were winning this BDO World Championship. It's at the next sort of tier down from the elite, because they were all playing the PDC World Championship. Mark Webster and Les Wallace, whose surnames end with W, as does James Wade's. Oh my goodness, in real time. You've got to have a surname that starts with W if you want to be a left-handed super elite player. Wow, that's where I'm going wrong. I need to change my name to Timo Newman and I'll be all right. Anyway, so that's interesting. 1 tier down, you start to see what you might call like a typical representation. What about the PDC? 33 to 64. So not the top 32, but the next tier down, who don't get invited to so many big tournaments, but they're still obviously brilliant players. What would we expect here? Roughly 30 people, maybe we'd expect 3 left-handers. How many left-handers do you find in that group? You find 3 left-handers. Okay, so So there were 2 left-handers out of this group of 18. There were 3 left-handers in this group of roughly 30. Who are they? They are Mickey Mansell at number 43, Neil Zonnefeld at number 44, and Ryan Meikle at number 60. So this is fascinating. At the elite minus level, you have what looks like, and again, this is not statistically like proof because the numbers are small, but it is very intuitive what we're seeing here. You're seeing normal representation of left-handed players in the elite minus bracket. You are seeing essentially 0 representation, massive underrepresentation of left-handers at the elite level. And it's only one human being, James Wade, who's actually bucking that very, very barren statement, because there's one left-handed player in that elite level of the sport, okay, and that is James Wade, currently in the PDC rankings, but also, of course, historically with his glorious career. So let's keep that in mind. I'm going to wrap the video up here because I can already tell it's getting really long, but I'll come back to this. How can we explain that you have normal representation up to the elite minus level and then essentially 0 representation above that? I've got an explanation for that. Can't wait to share it with you for next time. So next video we're going to look at human factors. Who are these weird left-handed people like Timo Newman? What have they got to say about darts? Why aren't they world champions? I know why I'm not a world champion. Anyway, 3 darts at the Oki. Make them count, my friends. Great to be back, and I'll see you next time.